How much would you pay to watch ABC's iView?
And can Google really claim 5 billion more users?
Welcome to Vertical Hold, the tech show where we channel surf through the headlines in search of the big picture. I'm Adam Turner, and I'm here with a man who's insured against fire, flood and Godzilla attack, Alex Kidman. Alex, what's been happening in tech?
Apple used to be the home that no rumours could escape from, but not anymore it seems, with a lot of detail emerging about what the iPhone 6 is likely to be, or should I say, what the two iPhone 6s are likely to be. The current rumours suggest we'll see a standard size iPhone, by Apple terms, as well as a larger 5.5-inch model, possibly with optical image stabilisation. Of course, only Apple knows for sure.
Australian Chromecast owners have more to watch as Foxtel, Presto and Quickflix join EasyFlix in supporting Google's tiny streaming media player. ABC's iView shouldn't be too far behind, and Big Pond Movies may also be in the mix.
Amazon has launched its own entry into the smartphone space, announcing the Amazon Fire Phone. It's a mostly mid-range device, aside from the presence of a lot of cameras at the front to allow head tracking, and being an Amazon device, it's really closely tied into Amazon's content services. That probably means that we won't see this model of the Amazon Fire Phone down under.
SBS has jumped the gun and launched its new catch-up TV app before Freeview's official launch of Freeview Plus. Delayed several times due to technical delays and a bit of infighting between the broadcasters, Freeview's official electronic program guide should now launch in July, or maybe August.
So Adam, there's a proposal afoot to start charging for ABC's popular catch-up TV service, iView.
Yes,
you've been looking at this, haven't you?
Yeah, it fires up a lot of tension. People get very for or against. Everyone's like, it's my ABC, I've already paid for it, I shouldn't have to pay for it again. I can sort of see where those people are coming from, but at the same time, this streaming service costs a lot of money, and the government's giving them less and less money. So something's got to give. And I think that it's not unreasonable to maybe cough up a few bucks for ABC iView, or then in return, what else are you going to give up? Are you going to have ads in there? Are you going to have other sponsorship deals? Are you going to get rid of some ABC channels?
Just could not disagree with you more on this one.
Okay, all right. What do you propose?
Really,
rather than charge $2 or $3 a month?
It is one of those issues that people are diametrically opposed on, and that's cool.
And that might be us by the sounds of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, look, I think the problem with this proposal is twofold. First of all, IPTV is the future of TV. I don't think we disagree on that. I think TV is shifting towards IP, even though, yeah, we're going to struggle in Australia for 4K content based on the broadband that we've got. The big issue here, though, so IPTV is the future. It's where everything's got to move, and iView is already there. So the ABC's in this great gun position where it can say, well, hey, we've already got a service, we've already got the infrastructure in place. All that hard work is done, and we've done it first and a heck of a lot better than the commercial competition. Of that, yes, I have no doubt. And I think you probably agree with that.
The only one that comes even close is SBS. The
second thing is, though, the ABC is a public national broadcaster, and all three of those words are really quite important. It's a broadcaster, so it needs to hit as wide an audience as possible. You start charging, and you are immediately putting some products, some programs into a niche. You're saying, right, these are the things that are worth money, either because they figure there's some kind of commercial return on them that's worth it, or because the audiences are smaller, so they figure, well, that needs some money to bolster it up. You start entering that fully commercial TV world. And then you move away from the broadcasting, you move away from the public interest, because suddenly you have to start making these decisions when you shift over to IPTV. Well, does that program need that money? I know the ABC does this already. Obviously, it has to deal with budgets. It has to deal with these kind of cost considerations. But as soon as you do it in that kind of space where you're saying, well, there's some things we can charge for and there's some things that we can't, you lose sight of that broad public interest focus. Essentially speaking, it is a direct attack on the ABC as a public national broadcaster. These are considerations, for sure, for commercial broadcasters. They should not be considerations for the ABC.
See, what you're doing there is you're encompassing catch-up TV in their idea of broadcast as if it's not costing them any more, as if it's not an extra overhead. I agree with all the things you just said, but I still think there's room for a pricing model in there. But the way I would do it is I would take a Freeview style, a Hulu style approach. Hulu has a basic free service. There are certain things you can always watch on Hulu and not have to pay for it. But then if you pay a couple of bucks a month, you get access to the larger archive. I would do a similar thing with iView. I would we'll say everything in the last 7 days free. I would always make sure that public interest things, news, current affairs, that kind of stuff does not fall behind the paywall. But going back beyond that, for example, if you go to iView right now, Archer is on there. I love Archer more than anybody, right? But I don't really need to watch that for free. If I want to get my Archer fix, it wouldn't kill me to pay $1 or $2 for that. I just think there is wriggle room there. I understand your point, but if something's got to give, if it's not this, well, okay, we're going to get rid of the radio channels or the digital radio channels. I think that there is a certain part of it you could put aside, and if you made sure you left the essential things outside the paywall, like your news, your 7:30 report, all that kind of stuff,
this is exactly my point, Adam. This is exactly my point. Who decides what's essential when it comes to the ABC?
Someone's always making those, but someone's making those decisions anyway. That whether or not we do this, that decision's being made all the time.
But those decisions are made when a program is made. When you get to that broadcast area, it's there, it's available. They are a public national broadcaster. As soon as you start slicing and dicing, it is a slippery slope, and it is a slope that I think the ABC should not have to go down. I think it is essentially criminal that we're talking about underfunding it to this level. But
I agree. That's the problem. The reason why we're having this is because it's underfunded.
This suggestion specifically plays against the ABC's broader ongoing interest, because it essentially says, well, what you need to do is what the commercial guys do, is what Foxtel does, is charge for the content. We already pay for the content, not just the production, but the broadcast. IP is just a different form of broadcast. I'm not saying there isn't a cost in broadcasting it over the internet. Having said that, of course, it is a different costing model, given that you're talking about the consumer having a broadband connection, which the ABC has nothing to do with. Okay, so in your world, we start charging for iView for, like, that's more than a week old or whatever. Yeah. How much do you charge? What's a fair going price that people will pay? Because if they don't pay, remember, the whole thing under your model does kind of fall over, doesn't it?
You're right. That is a hard model. Well, let's take Quickflix as a benchmark, or Netflix Quickflix. You're looking at $10 a month. It's obviously got to be less than that because you're not getting the same breadth of service, and you are subsidizing something, as you say, you've already paid for. I reckon we'll say $2.99 a month, or round it off, and $30 a year. I don't think that's unreasonable. If you're watching more than 1 or 2 shows on iView a week, I don't think you should feel hard done by coughing up $2.99 a month.
Yeah, but if it's $3 a month, for God's sake, add that to my tax bill.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how much that would up to. But you could add it to your tax bill, but it won't get to the ABC. That's the problem. This way, at least you know where the money's going.
We're back to the. Yeah. Again, we're back to.
We could buy one. We could buy one less fighter jet.
At $3 a month, it does become that almost kind of arbitrary. Why are they doing it? They're going to spend a certain amount of money just in processing all those $3 payments that they may or may not get. It starts to kind of fall over. If you creep it up a bit higher, as you say, it starts to become this problem of, oh, well, some people pay it, some people won't. Suddenly the whole service falls out of it. It's fundamentally, it's a bad, and if I forgot to mention it, bad idea.
I think what we can agree on here is that we're arguing about imperfect solutions to a problem that really shouldn't occur, that really shouldn't exist in the first place. So, Alex, Google always has their finger in a lot of pies, but they've been up to even more than usual lately. What have they been doing over there?
Okay, well, Google's just held its big I/O developer conference, and to give you an idea of how big it was, the keynote for this thing ran 3 hours.
That's serious. That's Titanic serious.
Yeah. There was certainly a bit of yawning in the audience, although, to be fair, they had a lot to say. They announced the next version of Google Android. It's just going to be called Android L, and they're not named after sweets anymore, which makes me a little bit sad. But
that's a shame.
It's Android L, and it's got a new design language and an underlying scheme for theoretically better battery life. They announced their vehicle-based product for Android as well, showed off lots of Android Wear wristwatches, which in fact you'll be able to buy very, very shortly in Australia, the LG and the Samsung models for around $250. But they also introduced this concept that while they've got some pretty big user numbers, they claim around 1 billion people, they want the next 5 billion, and this really kind of interests me.
So that's basically everybody else. Is what, 6-7 billion people on the planet?
Yeah, Google wants everyone, every man,
that doesn't
woman,
sound
and child.
like Google at all.
Yeah, there's no evil agenda there. But their pitch for all of this, and their pitch in an Android sense, is that they want to go for mid-range and low-range devices, but running the latest version of Android.
The problem with that is Android low-range devices are usually crap, to use a technical term.
Well, they don't have to be.
Except for the Nexus range.
Okay. I was going to say, by low range, I mean low cost, essentially. Yeah. But a lot of what they were talking about in their reference designs were what you would think of now as mid-range.
Yeah. Oh, that's not so bad then.
Yeah. But the Nexus is the classic example for markets like Australia, which are quite developed smartphone markets. Smartphones are ubiquitous here. And I think it brings up some interesting challenges for them to get these other 5 billion people. But it also, I think, shifts the game for Google in Australia. Because as they chase these 5 billion people, and I don't think they can get all 5 billion for a start, I suspect some of the larger markets, especially in China, are likely to shift to some of their own homegrown alternatives instead. Leaving that aside, as they shift towards this, they start to say, well, look, Android can run very, very well on mid-range devices. It puts this big pressure on your premium phone makers, on your Samsungs and your LGs and your Sonys who play in the Android space, to come up with something in a premium phone that people will go, hey, that's worth paying for.
Extra for, yeah.
Yeah. It's a problem that Apple doesn't have, because Apple doesn't play except in the premium space. If you want to go down the Apple phone route, you're paying big money for it, and Apple knows that you will. They're just not that interested in those. Well, I don't know. They're disinterested in those 5 billion people.
Prices when people pay $1,000 for an iPhone. Why sell a $500 one, basically?
Exactly. And if there is no $500 iPhone that runs just about as well, then they never have the issue.
Yeah.
But in doing all of this, you create this scenario where Google's trying to bring all of its services also under one umbrella. So one of the other things they announced was this idea that Android and Chromebook will merge a little bit more. So you'll start being able to run Android apps on their low-cost Chromebook notebooks. And again, Chromebook has always been their low-cost space. Have you played much with a Chromebook?
Yeah, I actually like the Chromebooks. I played with a couple of the Chromebooks when they first came out. And as long as you understand what they can and can't do, that's the thing. As long as you go in with your eyes open, they're actually pretty good. If you buy it thinking it's a budget Windows notebook, you're going to be very disappointed with it. If you're buying knowing that it's a very much internet-centric device, what it can and can't do. I do like the idea of bringing Android to it, because it brings a whole lot of functionality without having to reinvent the wheel. If I can suddenly tap into at least a section of the Android store, then there's a whole lot of functionality there, as long as it ties in nicely with everybody else and it doesn't feel like you're running two completely separate operating systems. As long as they can talk to each other a bit, that'd be pretty sweet, actually.
Yeah, it's, in a sense, it's the kind of thing that Microsoft's been trying to promote with Windows Phone for ages. Windows Phone looked like Windows 8 before Windows 8 looked like Windows 8.
Yes, but there's still not that functionality. Well, I suppose you can't actually run phone apps on them, but the thing is, they're the kind of the same apps anyway, so you sort of can, but in a different way. But the idea of taking something that was specifically designed for an Android smartphone and running on a notebook is a little bit different. But then we saw those weird, was it the Atrix notebooks and a few other Android Chromey hybrid-y things where you could plug your phone into your notebook and then it became a jet and flew you to an island or something?
Everyone's broadly kind of played with that, except maybe the jet bit. I don't recall that, but maybe you're getting prototypes that I'm not.
Maybe I am.
Everyone's played with that space as well. This is, I think, something
and
a
pretty
little bit
much
different.
failed. I don't think any of it really went anywhere.
Yeah. They were interesting ideas, but nobody kind of went, hey, that's a really great idea that I want to buy 5 million of. Where the Chromebook thing, of course, also gets interesting is if you can bring your Android account across. Not only are you talking about
yeah.
wide world of Android apps, you're also talking all the stuff, or maybe some of the stuff, that you've paid for already or that you've bought already, and suddenly, yeah, the Chromebook becomes a lot more appealing. I think it is a bit more of an attack on the Windows. You mentioned low-cost Windows notebooks. I think it's a bit more of an attack there as well, because they've announced they're ditching Quick Office, which is the way if you had a Chromebook and you grabbed a Microsoft Word document and tried to direct import it, it didn't throw it into Google Docs. It interpreted it via Quick Office, and this gave it all sorts of limitations. You couldn't copy tables, which was a really weird one, and all this kind of stuff. That's now going to change. Everything is just going to funnel straight into Google Docs, and in fact, Quick Office is a dead product as of right now.
Yeah, they're getting use of it. Now that's because I think also Office 365 is taking off as well, and they have to concede the fact that businesses still use Microsoft Office. You know, digital hipsters might say, "Oh, Microsoft's dead. Nobody uses that stuff." Yeah, businesses do, and there's a lot of businesses that wouldn't touch Google Apps with a 10-foot pole until they have decent Microsoft Office compatibility. So this will help Google break into that sort of more of a mainstream market who was still a bit reluctant to move away from Microsoft.
Speaking of things that are broken, the other thing that was completely, well, not necessarily broken, but certainly missing in terms of them hyping it up was Google Glass. Lots of it seemingly in the audience, none of it on stage.
I think maybe it was an ongoing practical joke, and they've set everybody up to wear these things, and now they're going to completely ignore them, and they'll just be a dead product, leaving all these people walking around going, "What happened to my Google Glass?"
Well, that just about wraps it up for this episode of Vertical Hold. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got to go check the Mothra clause in my insurance contract.
What's the premiums on that?